Here are a few audio samples of the eclectic topics covered in our YouTube shorts.
The explosion at Chernobyl was only the beginning. What followed was a disaster. In the hours after the blast, no warnings were issued. Residents of nearby towns continued daily life as radioactive material settled over them. It took 36 hours before evacuations began. Firefighters were sent in without knowing they were walking into lethal radiation. When machines failed in the cleanup, soldiers were ordered to do the work manually. Soviet officials minimized the scale of the event. The truth only surfaced when radiation was detected outside the USSR, forcing them to admit what had happened. One of the most devastating pandemics in recorded history began with a ship. In 1347, a Genoese trading vessel arrived in Sicily carrying the plague. The disease spread rapidly through ports and trade routes, reaching every corner of Europe within a few years. Transmitted by fleas on rats, it killed an estimated 25 to 50 million people, roughly 1/3 of Europe's population. Entire towns were emptied, fields went untended, mass graves became common, doctors had no cure, religious institutions lost authority. The Black Death did not just cause death on a massive scale, it dismantled medieval society and reshaped the structure of European life. The most secret project of World War II ended with a new kind of weapon and a new kind of war. In 1939, fearing Nazi Germany might build an atomic bomb, the US launched the Manhattan Project. Thousands of scientists worked in secret to create a weapon unlike anything before. On July 16, 1945, the first bomb was tested in the New Mexico desert. 3 weeks later, bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Over 100,000 people were killed, and while the war ended soon after, it marked the beginning of the nuclear age. In 1876, Sitting Bull stood against a government that was breaking its own treaties. The US had promised the Lakota control of the Black Hills, but after gold was discovered, that promise was abandoned. Refusing to give up his people's land, Sitting Bull gathered thousands of Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho near the Little Bighorn River. As US troops advanced, they decided to resist by force. On June 25th, Custer's cavalry attacked. Native warriors surrounded and killed over 200 soldiers. The victory was brief. US forces soon returned in greater numbers. Most tribes surrendered. Sitting Bull crossed into Canada, choosing exile over submission. In 1913, Henry Ford introduced the moving assembly line, a groundbreaking system where each worker performed just one task as the car moved past on a conveyor belt. This sped up production dramatically from over 12 hours to just 90 minutes per car. It slashed costs, standardized parts, and revolutionized efficiency. The Model T was simple, durable, and built for rough roads and became the first mass-produced car in history. And, more importantly, the first car everyday Americans could afford. Ford's system didn't just change the auto industry, it transformed manufacturing, mobility, and modern life itself. In 1900, 3 lighthouse keepers vanished from a remote Scottish island. They were never seen again. When the relief crew arrived, the lighthouse was dead silent. No one came to greet them. Inside, the clocks had stopped. A meal sat half-eaten. One coat was missing. The others were still hung neatly on the wall. The logbook described violent storms and desperate prayers, followed by a final unsettling entry claiming the storm had passed and all was calm. But the weather that week had been clear. no storms were ever recorded. There were no signs of a struggle, no damage, no bodies, just an empty tower and a light still turning. To this day, no one knows what happened on the Flannan Isles. April 15th, 1912. The Titanic, the largest ship of its time and believed to be unsinkable, struck an iceberg in the North Atlantic while carrying over 2,200 people. It had only 16 lifeboats. As the ship went down, panic spread while the band continued to play. In just over 2 hours, the vessel broke apart and disappeared beneath the sea. More than 1,500 lives were lost. The survivors were rescued hours later by the RMS Carpathia, arriving too late to save the rest. It was supposed to be NASA's third moon landing, but it nearly became a space disaster. April 1970. Apollo 13 launched toward the moon with 3 astronauts on board. 2 days in, an oxygen tank exploded, crippling the command module and forcing the crew to abort the mission. With limited power and life support, they used the lunar module as a lifeboat. NASA engineers quickly devised new procedures, including a risky engine burn to adjust their course. The crew looped around the moon and performed critical manual alignments to stay on track. After 4 tense days in deep space, re-entry began. The damaged spacecraft held together and Apollo 13 splashed down safely in the Pacific Ocean. In 218 BCE, Hannibal launched one of the boldest invasions in history, leading war elephants over the Alps to attack Rome. Instead of sailing, he marched from Carthaginian Spain, crossed the Pyrenees, and forced his army through the frozen terrain of the Alps. The crossing was brutal. Soldiers froze, horses fell, supplies were lost. But after 15 days, what remained of his force emerged into Italy, exhausted but alive. Rome was stunned. No one had ever invaded from the north with elephants. Hannibal went on to destroy entire Roman armies, including at Cannae in 216 BCE, where he surrounded and killed tens of thousands. He remained in Italy for over 15 years, winning major battles but never capturing Rome. When Carthage was threatened, he returned to defend it and was defeated by Scipio Africanus at Zama in 202 BCE. One of the most scrutinized assassinations in modern history unfolded in broad daylight. On November 22, 1963, President John F. Kennedy was shot and killed while riding in an open car through downtown Dallas. As his motorcade passed Dealey Plaza, 3 shots were fired from the 6th floor of a nearby building. Kennedy was pronounced dead less than an hour later. A former Marine named Lee Harvey Oswald was arrested for the crime, but denied involvement. 2 days later, Oswald was shot and killed on live television by nightclub owner Jack Ruby. The Warren Commission concluded Oswald acted alone, but doubts and alternative theories have persisted for decades. The Vietnam War was one of the most controversial and devastating conflicts of the 20th century. A war between ideologies, not just nations. Communism and capitalism clashed in Southeast Asia. After World War II, Vietnam fought for independence from colonial rule. In 1954, the country was divided into a communist North and a US-backed South. What began as a local struggle became part of the Cold War. America sent advisors, then troops. The North used guerrilla tactics and hidden routes. The US relied on helicopters, artillery, and air power. Combat in dense terrain was difficult. A village could be calm by day and hostile by night. In 1968, a surprise offensive shifted public opinion. At home, the draft pulled in young men and protests spread. The war became a daily presence on television. In 1973, a peace deal was signed and US forces withdrew. 2 years later, the southern capital fell and Vietnam was reunified. Over 3 million Vietnamese and 58,000 Americans died.
I'm Mark Vinet, and thanks for joining me. It's always nice to have your company.